So this is what we're making, a twisted square wire bangle. And if you do it correctly, once it's polished, I want you to have to struggle to find your join. Okay? Nice and simple. We're starting with a piece of square wire that is 2.5 in thickness, 2.5 millimeters, and 230 millimeters long. Now that's longer than you would need for a normal bangle, but when we twist it, it's going to get shorter. So we'll clamp one end into the vise and then grab the other end with a set of vice grips and twist away. Another one of the reasons for cutting your metal longer than you need is when you clamp the end in the vise, and then when you clamp the other end with your vice grips, self-locking pliers, but these actually are vice grips, you're going to damage the end, and we want to just cut that off. So what we're going to do is give it try to get a nice even twist. And what normally happens is the end will twist tighter than the middle. That doesn't bother me, but if it bothers you, then you're going to have to keep twisting. That's a fairly tight twist. So what I'm going to do now, release the pliers, and I'm going to measure this for length and then saw it. So get the inside diameter of your bangle sizer. I'm going for 66 millimeters. Then we need to add the height of this wire, and as I turn it, it's 2.89, so we'll call it 2.9. So that's 68.9 times 3.14. So we have to cut this 216.3 millimeters long. And if you look, hold it against your straight edge, leave this end stick past and mark it. Then come back to 216 and mark this. And just look to see if this is going to line up. And it is. We have the same spot on our wire. If it was less of a twist, it would probably be more difficult to line it up. And at that point, I would go back to the vise and I would twist it a little bit more so that this spot matched perfectly. Otherwise, you're going to make it a little bit longer or a little bit shorter than you actually want. So we'll saw this, file it nice and flat, anneal it before we try to bend it because we've work hardened it by twisting it. So just brace this against your bench peg. Saw the other end. So just bring this up to a dull red. It's easier to see if you have the light out, but I've done this enough times that I know. And you just shift it down to the other end. And then we'll quench it. dry it off. You're allowed to use a tissue or a paper towel or your t-shirt. Now, just form this around with your hand because it should be nice and soft. Have a look where the ends touch and make sure that the twist is perfectly lined up. Because if it's not lined up, then it's going to be a bugger to get it so it looks proper. It's pretty close, but it's a little bit off. So what I'm going to do is file this back a little, because we want as perfect a join as you can get. Being that it's twisted, it'll be really obvious if you don't get it right. Okay, I'm happy with that. If we get this thing to focus, you can see that it's really close. So I'm just going to lay this on my charcoal block, flux it a couple of pieces of hard solder, and then we'll quench it and round it up. Mix up your flux. Always mix your flux so that the powder is mixed with the water. Flux the join. Doesn't have to be a huge amount of flux. Now, I'm going to pick solder this. Heat the pick, lower it, touch the solder, it'll ball up. Heat the join, brush the flame back and forth so that both sides are the same temperature. When the flux goes clear, touch your solder. You can see, even before pickling, that it's a pretty nice join and it's pretty well lined up. So now we'll pickle it to get the flux off before we tidy this up. So we're out of the pickle. Dry it off. Have a look. It should be perfect. Pretty nice, if I do say so myself. Now we're going to go on our bracelet mandrel with the rawhide hammer. And don't be too aggressive with this because we want the square twist to be very visible. So, and the wire is fairly small, so it won't take much. Make sure it's nice and round. Make sure it's flat. Just by putting it on the bench, looking at it, if it's not flat, put it on your wooden block and just tap it, or you can put it on your bench plate and tap it. Now, what we want at this point is to tidy up our solder. Now, all I'm using for this is a black abrasive disc. It's about the same as 400 grade paper. And I'll just zoom in a bit so you can see what I'm doing. I'm bracing this, bracing my hands together, and I'm just going to gently tidy up the solder. And this is one of those things where if you use the right amount of solder, when you tidy this up, it should be almost invisible. Just a little bit at a time. Don't go too far or too fast, because if you undercut it, it's going to be impossible to fix it. So a little bit at a time, and then just put it in the tumbler. So you can see, by using the correct amount of solder, matching the twist, and just doing pretty fine touch-up work with your sanding disc, it should be pretty invisible. So hallmark it opposite the joint and polish it. You're done.